took the plot of the movie Hot Fuzz and put it in a D&D game, and it went better than I could have possibly imagined. Hey everybody, it's Nick, and oh my goodness, it's been a minute. I have abandoned you. I am so sorry. It's been a long time. It's been a long winter break. A lot of things going on in my real life. And also, we just didn't play D&D very much over the break. People were busy in the holidays and everything. People traveled, Christmas, etc. And so we didn't play tons of D&D, but I am behind a few sessions. And so I really wanted to get back to this series and let you guys know what has happened and what's been going on in the campaign, because frankly, some really cool things are happening. I took the plot of Hot Fuzz and I put it in my D&D game, and it's pretty cool how that transpired. And it sort of is predicated off of an earlier D&D video that I made where I talked about ripping off major influences and works. As long as they're not fantasy, people have a hard time recognizing them. If you take the plot of The Lord of the Rings and you stick it in your game, everybody was going to recognize it. Everybody knows what's happening. But if you take the plot of Star Wars, Pirates of the Caribbean, people might be less likely to notice what is happening in your game and where your sources are. And honestly, even if they do, it's just a lot of fun. So I took the plot of Hot Fuzz and I put it in a game, and it was basically this cult had formed a major foothold in this town, and the players had to figure out what happened in this town. What they didn't know is they were interacting with tons of different cultists. Some people were not cultists, but by and large there were lots of cultists here, and they slowly pieced together, well, these two people said one thing and these two people said another thing, and they all said things that were kind of different than each other but mostly fall into two camps. So who do we believe? Who do we agree with? Let's investigate this, that, and the other. And in general, I haven't had a lot of success with investigations and mystery in my D&D game, but this went really well. And so rather than lay out exactly blow for blow what my players did and how they approached it, I want to sort of give you the framework of what I was thinking and planning and how I executed a mystery like this in a D&D game. First and foremost, I made sure that I always gave my players really good verbs, really good things that they could act on, actionable, specific information, things to go and do next. And it wasn't, unravel a mystery. It was literally figure out what happened in this town and tell the Duke about it. And in figuring out what happened in this town, you have to talk to these specific people. And this is how I do a lot of my faction things, is I boil down factions into NPCs. Rather than think about this whole faction, there's 200 people in this cult. I didn't want to think about all 200 people. I figured out who are the cult leaders, and they hold positions of power in the town. Let's have them be people that the players end up interacting with, as well as people who are not cultists. They also have positions of power and influence in the town, and the players have to talk to them. And so rather than say, hey, go talk to some people and figure out what happened, is go talk to these 4 people and figure out the facts of what happened. And so it helped to make it very actionable, very specific, and they started to unravel certain things. They started to realize who they needed to talk to, who they needed to question, and what questions to ask. As they pieced things together, they started to realize that some of the mystery swirled around this location that was sort of supposedly haunted in the outskirts of town. And so, in spite of not knowing the answers of what was going on, they still had actionable information. They said, well, at least we can go see about this place, see if it's really haunted, see if we can discover anything here, and hopefully that will give us some more information, and we have more steps that we can take afterwards. And of course, under that tower, I have an entire cult's lair ready and waiting to go, and the players are going to fight their way through this cult lair and discover that there's a cult to Lolth here, and there's a Drider living here, and they've got all these cool interactions, and they got prisoners that they need to talk to, and monsters in derelict corners of this underground crypt. And so I'm really excited to run through this with my players, and then they get there, They walk in, and they charm person on the first 2 people that they meet, who fail their saves, and they smooth talk their way through some of the dungeon, ambushing people, gathering information, and then quickly escaping. So it was yet another example of my players outwitting what I thought was going to happen, and instead doing something much cooler. Rather than hack and slash their way through this dungeon, they freed some captives and grabbed some information and then blitzed out of there with new hard data. So through all of this, they learned that some monsters had come and absolutely devastated this town of Bullridge, and it was the fault of the cult. The cult actually let the monsters in. They let them into their secret tunnels underneath the city, and then let them come up through their own basements and secret trapdoors. They ravaged the city and then disappeared as quickly as they came. These demons and gnolls are wreaking havoc. And they figured out that the cult has ties in other places. There is a commander at the wall. There's a wall that separates sort of the wilds of the east and the more civilized nation of Haven in the west. And this giant fantasy wall, which all fantasy settings should have a giant fantasy wall. The guy who controls who gets to go from east to west is a cultist, and so that is a huge piece of news that they have to pass on to the Duke. Your man at the wall cannot be trusted. And so the players have learned quite a bit about this situation, but they thought that as they were dealing with the situation, maybe there'd be 4 or 5 people in this little cult. It'd be a small affair, and they slowly started to realize half the town were cultists, and needing to eradicate that was a thing that they couldn't handle. So they said, you know, we're not going to deal with this problem. We're going to go back to the Duke and share with him what we have learned and the information we have gathered, and maybe he can make a decision about that. But goodness gracious, we can't deal with this. This is a problem bigger than we can handle. So those are some of my big picture thoughts about running mysteries and investigations, making sure the players have actionable information, boiling down factions into key NPCs, and using them as representatives. And then sort of, if you can, ripping off other sources of fiction, movies, books, TV shows, comics that you are really interested in, and putting them in your game. It's really fun, and so the players had a lot of fun. They did not realize they were in the plot of Hot Fuzz until they figured out, oh, it's like half the town that are in on it. We gotta leave. We can't fight half a town. And that was a really cool moment. As they were fleeing from the town, taking this information back to the Duke, they were like, wait, was this the plot of Hot Fuzz? And so it was like, they recognized that it was a movie, but it didn't detract from the enjoyment for them at all. They thought it was really cool that they got to play through Hot Fuzz, especially they didn't know it until after it had already happened. So now the players are headed back to the Duke in Riften to tell him all the information that they have, to see what his decision is, maybe get a little bit of downtime in Riften for their own plans and projects, and then see where they go next. But first we need to figure out, what does the Duke say when they hear all of the information from the players? What does the Duke do with all of this new information? It's going to be really interesting to see his response and see how the players interact with that. So I'm sorry that it's been such a long break. I appreciate all the people who have subscribed to the channel recently, either off of this content or my older videos. It's sort of trickled back to me being encouraged to make these videos again, and just wanting to keep people informed about what's happening in my game, because I think cool stuff is going on, and it's been tough to find time to make these, but I think I will be able to for at least the next little while. I'm always hesitant to promise, yes, for the next 3 years I will document every session. But for the next little while, I think that we will be able to at least get caught back up and figure out what our heroes are up to and where they go from here. So thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.